Hey everyone, I'm Tom. Might see me on the internet as awkweb or TMM, one of those things. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about frames with Frog. First, how many people here have built a frame before? Nice, decent amount. How many people have used Frog? Awesome, some people have used Frog. Cool, so yeah, this is gonna kind of be like an intro into like what Frog is, why you might want to use it, and then we'll do like a quick demo, like dive into some code with Frog and sort of see like everything that it has to offer. And yeah. So yeah, FM Frog morning. I'm Tom, yeah, also awkweb. I work on a couple other projects, WAGME, VM, if you're familiar with those. And yeah, the thing that I'm really interested in is building like really high quality TypeScript tools for Ethereum. Things like that focus on like developer experience, making it like really nice to use, because you know we spend a lot of time like working on code and stuff, making sure it's like performant, things work really well. I personally am really into like type inference and doing like type level programming and stuff like that. And yeah, if you're curious to like learn any more about those things, or also check out like my co-maintainer who's in Australia, you can go to webm.dev. That's kind of like our site with all these links, landing page. Yeah, so we're gonna talk about Frog. So Frog is sort of like what we decided to make. We played around with frames a little bit, and thought it was really cool. You can build frames like basically any way you want. Like I built some frames in Elixir, like I've seen people building like Python frames and like doing some other crazy stuff. So it's really cool that it kind of takes like these web like 1.0 principles and then sort of applies them to like something that's modern that people can interact with in a setup. And yeah, lots of other ways frames are great, but I'm not gonna talk about that. So yeah, Frog is our like attempt at building a framework for building frames. Again, it's like focused on developer experience and like speed, like making it really easy to like iterate and build like these mini app type things. Trying to make it be like a really good experience, similar to where things are in like the front end world these days, where it's like you're able to make changes in your editor, you get automatic updates immediately in your browser that maintains state. So you can really like go through like a really quick iteration loop and then like deploy with Frog anywhere that most people probably deploy. You can like deploy alongside your Next.js app. You can sort of proxy it into your Next.js app. You can use Vercel, which a lot of people use. You can use serverless functions. You can use edge functions. You can use Cloudflare. If you're super into Bun, you can like use Bun and deploy on Fly or something else like that. And yeah, if you're not familiar with Frog, frog.fm is our like website. You can learn more about it. And then there's like a Frog channel on Farcaster where it's like 50% like help me with Frog and 50% memes of frogs, if that's like your, yeah. They're wholesome memes of frogs. The internet and frogs have had a bad reputation over the years, so we're hopefully reclaiming frogs. So yeah, like why do we work on this? I think like, whenever we decide to work on a project, it's usually because it's always because we are building stuff like with these tools and have like personal experience about like, what if we did something a little bit differently, or like what if we standardized some pattern and then made it available to like everyone. So yeah, usually when we like decide to like build a library, it's because like we really care about working on this problem because we have it ourselves. And so yeah, our goals for Frog is to really shorten the dev loop. In the early days of building frames, a lot of people would use like some proxy service to like expose their local server over the internet and then use the Warpcast frame validator, which is like still really valuable if you want to like test it out like in the Warpcast context. But it wasn't super conducive to like fast development experience. And there's just like a lot of moving pieces, especially if you were a beginner or someone that like, doesn't code full time, but like was intrigued by frames because it's like HTML, CSS, like, you know, some post requests, it would kind of be like a bigger burden. So yeah, the first key was like, let's make frames, like building frames faster. I think another thing that's like often overlooked is like, you know, it's incredible that you can build frames in lots of different ways, like I said earlier. But you know, in the early days of the web, like lots of people, and still people build websites in lots of different ways. Like people use like, you know, React, but there's also like HTMX, like Laravel, PHP, like Cold Fusion, lots of other stuff. But one really great thing about having like a framework like Frog is having like the shared like syntax and like language for like, you know, collaborating with your peers on, you know, that like, you know, someone that you're collaborating with, it's like you both know how to like set up the app structure and like access data and do that type of stuff. It's also really great, you know, boon for open source culture. Like it's really incredible that I can go on to GitHub and then like, you know, go see frames that were built with Frog, and like I can instantly like, you know, like clone them locally and start playing around with them and using them just because like, you know, we're all speaking the same language with developing. This relates to composability. Like you could go on GitHub too and see that someone like created an image for their frame in a certain way, and you could just like, you know, fork that into your code base. Or, you know, one thing is like that we haven't seen a lot of, and we're hoping to like have some ways to make this easier, is like, you know, being able to like link across like different frames, like different origins. So like, you know, this could work with transaction frames where it's like, you know, you submit a transaction and then with the result, you're actually posting to like, you know, a block explorer frame from like once upon or something like that. Yeah, and then lastly, I think this is kind of like the nerd snipe thing. Whenever like we build software, is like we really like trying to like figure out like, you know, the most fun way to like push like, you know, type safety inference, developer experience, to make it really fast. Also make the code look beautiful, which some people say that's a bad thing to focus on, but I think it's fun. So yeah, if you're not familiar with Frog, one of the things that the way we designed it is to sort of like, kind of like mirror like, you know, your code, what you're declaring in your code, sort of like you can sort of see the output almost structurally. So it's like, you know, you start with your image, which is like at the top, and you can compose that using JSX, which is like pretty familiar for folks in like the React world, Vue world, or, you know, any other. It's basically just like markup, you know, HTML with some extra bonuses in it. And something to note that even though this is using JSX, it's not using React, so it's like lightweight and small. And then below you can compose your intents. So we're calling them intents. And yeah, those are like, you know, the text input for the frame or buttons. And, you know, you can sort of just like pop them in there. Pretty straightforward to build the frame. This is like a basic frame. When you click the button, it doesn't do anything, but you know, it's basic. And then, yeah, you can sort of extend it a little bit more. So this is like the same frame as before where you can select a fruit, but now when you select something, you can see that like conditionally the image updates. Like on the initial, like we can call it render, we're just going to show select your fruit. This is like someone loading up your frame in Warpcast. And then once someone selects a button, now we can expose that button value that they selected and update the frame. Like pretty straightforward. And like all these values that are coming from C here, which is like the context, that's like from, you know, verified data, and there's like a couple other like properties on there that like we inject in, or what I'll talk about in a sec, middleware injects in that allow you to like harness more power in your frames. And yeah, I mean, similar to like, I think lots of frames libraries, or like with the way people build frames, it's like you want to create an image and generate that. And so you can either use inline styles here or something like Tailwind. So yeah, to sort of recap that, there's images and intents. Images uses this library that we created called HANA OG, which uses like a couple other Open Graph libraries behind the scenes. You can compose layouts with inline styles or Tailwind. There's a couple ways you can do it with Tailwind. You can like pass them in as normal class names, or there's like a TW prop that you can use, which we'll show you. And yeah, I don't know, like expect maybe like some improvements to like image composition, because that's often the hardest part for people to like maintain consistent style, layout, do it quickly, like debuggability of like an image. Like you can't like inspect the image in your browser right now and like, you know, be like, oh, this layout is here. It's like a flat, like rasterized thing. And then yeah, intents, like Frog has a bunch of them. They really just like follow like the spec for like all the different types of buttons. There's also a button.reset if you want to like return your frame back to the initial state, just like a utility that we have for doing that. And then yeah, text input. So yeah, I think this concept is really powerful. It allows you to like then scale up and build like a bunch of different types of frames. So before we had this frame where it was like all done in like the same route of like the frame app. You know, you could select a fruit, and then in the same like frame body, it would conditionally render. This one's like the same concept, but broken out into two separate frames that like, you know, one posts to the other. And then here's another concept that I think is really great about Frog is middleware. Yeah, like you can basically create middleware. Like middleware is a concept that I think people are familiar with, but if you're not, basically it's like, you know, there's a request that comes into your app. Middleware allows you to like manipulate that request either beforehand, you know, change it, like transform it, add properties to it, like enrich it, or so you can either do that before the request or after the request, like when there's a response. You can update the response, kind of do whatever you want to it. And so here's an example. We have like a Nanar middleware in Frog, which allows you to like automatically get, you know, some info that's injected in onto the context here, which is cool. Normally it's like you'd have to, you know, do this stuff by hand, which isn't a problem, but you know, it's really nice to be able to like jump into an app, and then instead of writing all this code repeatedly, it's like you just automatically get it. And middleware can either operate on like the global like app level or on like an individual route. So that way, you know, if you care about like performance with a certain frame and you're worried about like this Nanar request taking too long, you can either omit that from that specific frame, or you can push this middleware down into one that you need it on. So it's kind of cool, like, you know, it's all typed too, so you get all this like good stuff, and yeah, in this case you could render it out. So that's middleware. There's also like a Pinata middleware now. You can write your own middleware. You can imagine like, you know, one thing that, you know, different types of data, like injecting that into your frames is really useful. I think someone opened up a pull request adding community middleware to the Frog docs, which is like, oh, like let's do a CAPTCHA or like a challenge, you know, before like showing them the frame. So like middlewares can actually like, you know, could return frames too. You know, maybe someone needs to verify first, or, you know, you check to see if they have like a token or something, and if they don't, you like route them somewhere else. Yeah, and I guess like the last piece here of like the overview of Frog is transactions. Like, yeah, you can create transactions, pretty basic spec. I think like one thing that we care about in Frog is like having really good developer experience for that. So if you've ever used like VM and WAGMI, and you know that, you know, we'll infer as many types as possible based on your ABI, we'll do the same thing in Frog too. So that way it's like you can make sure that, you know, when someone clicks that transaction button and they get prompted like by their wallet, you know, you're not sending them like bad data that's gonna cause like loss of funds or like a incorrect transaction or something. You sort of get to like push that onto yourself as a developer and make sure stuff is set up appropriately to begin with. Yeah, and the other thing is like that's important is like Frog has like built-in dev tools. You know, in the spirit of like making the dev loop really, really fast, instead of like proxying out to the Warpcast validator, it's like what you know, the experience should be something like, you know, you run the dev server with your frame, and you know, you get these dev tools that you can use to like time travel debug and stuff like that, and it automatically works your frame and updates when you make changes. So yeah, I figured we could jump in here. How do I look? Do I look like the Frog? Okay, so yeah, like figure we could do like a quick. Okay, so yeah, this is sort of like what it's like if you are using Frog. I've already like filled out some stuff here for like the frame for the purpose of the demo, but it's pretty easy to get started if you just, you know, run like the create frog template or now. So yeah, that is kind of like a quick tour of those things. Let's see, there's not much more here. Yeah, so if you want to get started, you can run npm ifrog, or, you know, I guess like whatever package manager you like. I like pnpm, and then or npm init frog to sort of like go through the whole scaffold process. And yeah, these are some other places you can find info. I feel like with like all of our projects that we work on, we're super open to feedback and collaborating with folks and just trying to make stuff better. So if anyone's interested in like, you know, contributing or has feedback to give, super down. Yeah, I think this is a really fun project. I think similarly, unlike some of our other projects, that there's like a lot more learning curve to get involved with contributing. This one has been a lot easier because there's so many different facets of it that are all pretty basic concepts. Like there's like the Frog framework itself, it's the dev tools. So if anyone wants to contribute with any of those things, yeah, let me know, or just like open up a pull request or something. So yeah, that's the gist. Thanks for having me.